The known history of the horse in Britain starts with horse remains found in Pakefield, Suffolk, dating from 700,000 BC, and in Boxgrove, West Sussex, dating from 500,000 BC. Early humans were active hunters of horses, and finds from the Ice Age have been recovered from many sites. At the time, land which now forms the British Isles was part of a peninsula attached to continental Europe by a low-lying area now known as Doggerland, and land animals could migrate freely between what is now island Britain and continental Europe. The domestication of horses, and the use to pull vehicles, had begun in Britain by 2500 BC. By the time of the Roman conquest of Britain, British tribes could assemble armies which included thousands of chariots, horse improvement as a goal, and horse breeding as an enterprise. Date to medieval times. King John imported 100 Flemish stallions. Edward III imported 50 Spanish stallions, and various priories and abbeys owned stud farms. Laws were passed restricting and prohibiting horse exports and for the culling of horses considered undesirable in type. By the 17th century, specific horse breeds were being recorded as suitable for specific purposes. A new horse-drawn agricultural machinery was being designed. Fast coaches pulled by teams of horses with thoroughbred blood could make use of improved roads, and coaching-in proprietors owned hundreds of horses to support the trade. Steam power took over the role of horses in agriculture from the mid-19th century, but horses continued to be used in warfare for almost another 100 years, as the speed and agility of a rough terrain remained unequal. Working horses had all but disappeared from Britain by the 1980s, and today horses in Britain are kept almost wholly for recreational purposes. Pleistocene epoch. The earliest horse remains found in the area now covered by Britain and Ireland date to the Middle Pleistocene. Two species of horse have been identified from remains at Pakefield, East Anglia, dating back to 700,000 BC. Spear damage on a horse shoulder bone discovered at Eartham Pit, Boxgrove, dated 500,000 BC, showed that early hominids were hunting horses in the area at the time. The land which now comprises the British Isles was periodically joined to continental Europe by a land bridge, extending from approximately the current coast of North Yorkshire to the English Channel, most recently until about 9,000 years ago, dependent on the rise and fall of sea levels associated with advancing and retreating ice ages. This allowed humans and fauna to migrate between these areas as the climate fluctuated. Hunters could follow the prey, including equids. Although much of Britain from this time is now beneath the sea, remains have been discovered on land that show horses were present and being hunted. In this period, significant finds include a horse tooth dating from between 55,000 and 47,000 BC in horse bones dating from between 50,000 and 45,000 BC, recovered from Pinhole Cave, in the Creswell Crags ravine in the North Midlands. Further horse remains from the same era have been recovered from Kent's Cavern, in Robin Hood Cave, also in Creswell Crags. A horse tooth was recovered dating from between 32,000 and 24,000 BC. This cave has also preserved one of the earliest examples of prehistoric artwork in Britain, an engraving of a horse on a piece of horse bone. A goddess figurine carved from horse bone and dating from around 23,000 BC has been recovered from Pakefield Cave in South Wales. Horse remains dating to the later part of this period roughly coincide coinciding with the end of the last glacial period, have been found at Farndon Fields, Nottinghamshire, dating from around 12,000 BC. Mother Grundy's Parlour, also in Cresswell Crags, contains horse remains showing cut marks indicating that hunting of horses occurred there around 10,000 BC. A study of Victoria Cave in North Yorkshire produced horse bones showing cut marks dating from about the same time. Holocene period. The Holocene period began around 11,700 years ago and continues to the present, identified with the current warm period, known as marine isotope stage 1, or MIS 1. The Holocene is considered an interglacial period in the current Ice Age. Horse remains dating from the Mesolithic period, or Middle Stone Age, early in the Holocene, have been found in Britain, though much of Mesolithic Britain now lies under the North Sea, the Irish Sea and the English Channel, a material which may include archaeological evidence for the presence of the horse in Britain continues to be washed into the sea by rivers and coastal erosion. During the Devensian glaciation, the northernmost part of the peninsula from which Britain was formed was covered with glacial ice, and the sea level was about 120 meters lower than it is today. This glacial ice advanced and retreated several times during this period, and much of what is now the North Sea and the English Channel was an expansive low-lying tundra, which, around 12,000 BC, extended northwards to a point roughly parallel with Aberdeenshire in eastern Scotland. In 1998, archaeologist B.J. Coles named this low-lying area Doggerland, in which the River Thames flowed somewhat to the north of its current route, joining the Rhine to flow west to the Atlantic Ocean along the line of what is now the English Channel. Human hunters roamed this land, which by about 8000 BC had a varied coastline of lagoons, salt marshes, mudflats, beaches, inland streams, rivers, marshes, and included lakes. It may have been the richest hunting, fowling and fishing ground available to the people of Mesolithic Europe. Horse remains dating from 10,500–8000 BC have been recovered from Sewell's Cave, Flixton, Seamakar, Uxbridge and Thatcham. Remains dating from around 7000 BC have been found in Gough's Cave in Cheddar, although there is an apparent absence of horse remains between 7000 BC and 3500 BC. There is evidence that wild horses remained in Britain after it became an island separate from Europe by about 5500 BC. Pre-domestication wild horse bones have been found in Neolithic tombs of the Seven Cotswold type, dating from around 3500 BC. Domestication in pre-Roman times. Domesticated horses were present in Bronze Age Britain from around 2000 BC. Bronze Age horse trappings including snaffle bits have been found which were used in harnessing horses to vehicles. Bronze Age cart wheels have been found at Flag Fen and Blair Drummond, the latter dating from around 1255 to 815 BC, though these may have belonged to vehicles pulled by oxen. Early Bronze Age evidence for horses being ridden is lacking, though bareback riding may have involved materials which have not survived have not been found, but horses were ridden in battle in Britain by the late Bronze Age. Domesticated ponies were on Dartmoor by around 1500 BC. Excavations of Iron Age sites have recovered horse bones from ritual pits at a temple site near Cambridge, and around 20 Iron Age chariot burials have been found, including one of a woman discovered at Wetwang Slack. The majority of Iron Age chariot burials in Britain are associated with the Aras culture, and in most cases the chariots were dismantled before burial. Exceptions of the Ferrybridge and Newbridge chariots, which are the only ones found to have been buried intact. The new bridge burial has been radiocarbon dated to 520-370 BC, and the ferry bridge burial is likely to be of similar date. Towards the end of the Iron Age, there is much evidence for the use of horses in transport and battle, and for extensive trade between the inhabitants of Britain and other cultures. A collection of Iron Age artifacts from Poldon Hill in Somerset includes a very large hoard of horse gear, and a rare, cast copper alloy cheekpiece dating from the late pre-Roman Iron Age was found in St. Dew, Cornwall. The horse was an important figure in Bronze Age and Iron Age Celtic religion and myth, and is symbolized in the hill figure of the Uffington White Horse, near the Iron Age hill fort of Uffington Castle in Oxfordshire. Roman Britain to the Norman conquest. By the time of Julius Caesar's attempted invasion of Britain in 55 BC, the inhabitants of Britain included proficient horsemen. Caesar's forces were met by British horsemen and war chariots, the chariots outfighting the Gaulish horsemen who had accompanied him. Caesar later faced organized resistance led by Cassivellaunus, with over 4,000 war chariots. To the east of the Pennines, the Romans also encountered the Gabrantavici, or horse-riding warriors. The spread and development of horse trappings recovered from this period, such as bits, strap junctions and terrets, have been used to indicate the withdrawal of ruling groups of Britons during the Roman conquest of Britain. A large amount of horse dung has been found in a well at a Roman fort in Lancaster, Lancashire, which was a base for cavalry units in the 1st and 2nd centuries. The bones of 28 horses have been found in a Roman well at Dunstable, Bedfordshire, which was a Roman posting station on Watling Street, where horses would have been kept. These horses had been butchered for horse meat, but a revival of the cult of the Celtic goddess Epona, protector of horses, donkeys and mules, may account for horse carcasses buried whole at Dunstable, with special care, buried with humans in a 4th-5th century cemetery. These horses represent a belief that Epona protected the dead. One of the earliest records of British horses being recognized for the quality and exported dates from the Roman era. Many British horses were taken to Italy to improve native stock. Some of the earliest evidence of horses used for sport in Britain also dates from Roman times, a chariot racing arena having been discovered at Colchester, in Essex. For the 5th century, the role of the horse in Anglo-Saxon culture is partly illustrated by the number of words for horse in Old English. These distinguish between cart horses, pack horses, riding horses, horses for breeding, horse suitable for royalty and aristocracy, and war horses. There was no word for plough horse, and no evidence that horses were used for ploughing in Anglo-Saxon times, when this was still done by ox teams. The Domesday Book records a horse used for harrowing. In 1086, horses were used predominantly for transporting goods and people. Numerous English place names, such as Stadhampton, Studley and Studdy, refer to the keeping of studs, in this case herds, of horses, and Anglo-Saxon stirrups and spurs have been found by archaeologists. Horses were also raised for sport, and a racecourse in Kent is mentioned in a charter of King Edred, dated 949. There is some evidence that horses were occasionally eaten, perhaps in a hard winter, or ridden until 5 years of age and then slaughtered for meat, but there are many references in medieval sources indicating that the Anglo-Saxons placed a high value on horses. They were often included in the price paid for land and in bequests and other gifts, and king's servants included horse-thens, or marshals. Numerous horses and horse breeding establishments were recorded in Domesday Book, though many more horses were probably omitted, given the need for horses for riding and pulling carts. Only 71 smiths are recorded in Domesday Book, but others must be concealed under the heading of other classes. 6 smiths in Hereford were obliged to supply 120 horseshoes each year for the maintenance of horses belonging to warriors. Horses held religious significance in Anglo-Saxon paganism. The 8th century historian Bede of Jarrow, in Northumbria, wrote that the first Anglo-Saxon chieftains, in the 5th century, were Hengist and Horsa, Old English words for stallion and horse, respectively. Modern scholars regard Hengist and Horsa as horse deities venerated by pagan Anglo-Saxons, euhemerized into ancestors of Anglo-Saxon royalty, and stemming from the divine twins of Proto-Indo-European religion, with cognates in various other Indo-European cultures. Horses appear frequently in accounts concerning miraculous events in the context of Anglo-Saxon Christianity. In the 7th century, a horse is reported to have revealed warm bread and some meat when St. Cuthbert was hungry, by pulling straw from the roof of a hut, and, when Cuthbert was suffering from a diseased knee, he was visited by an angel on horseback, who helped him to heal his knee. In the 8th century, the Anglo-Saxon bishop Willibald of Eichstätt wrote that, when a source of fresh water was needed for a monastery on the site where St. Boniface had died, in the kingdom of Frisia, the ground gave way under the forelegs of a horse, and, when the horse was pulled free, a fountain of spring water came out of the ground and formed a brook. In the 10th century, King Edmund I is reported to have been saved from death while chasing a deer on horseback when he prayed for forgiveness for his maltreatment of St. Dunstan, and thereafter made him abbot of Glastonbury. The horse stopped at the edge of a cliff, over which the deer and hunting dogs had already fallen. On a later occasion, a horse fell dead under Dunstan when he heard a voice from heaven telling him that King Edred had died. Although there is reference to Viking horsemen fighting in the 10th century Battle of Suffolk in Ireland, the primary use for horses in Britain, some of which they captured or seized, and some of which they brought with them, was to facilitate rapid travel. This is a central purpose for which horses were used in Anglo-Saxon England, particularly in warfare, since conflict between the various Anglo-Saxon kingdoms was carried out over long distances. In the 7th century, King Penda of Mercia, in central England, took his armies north to Bamborough, nearly 50 miles north of Hadrian's Wall, and Oswald of Northumbria was killed fighting the Mercians in Shropshire. These armies probably rode horses to war, and the maintenance of horses was required of many, or perhaps all, who held land under Anglo-Saxon kings. In the 7th century, an Anglo-Saxon warrior was buried with his horse at Sutton Hoo. Carvings on Anglo-Saxon stone crosses feature warriors on horseback, and 62 war horses are recorded in Domesday Book. In the 11th century, Anglo-Saxon warriors on horseback fought successfully against Viking, Welsh and Scottish armies, the latter including Norman allies. Duke William of Normandy shipped horses across the English Channel when he invaded England in 1066, and the outcome of the subsequent Battle of Hastings has been described as the inevitable victory of stirrup cavalry over helpless infantry. The Battle of Hastings took place in King Harold of England's former earldom, at the centre of his property and connections, but it came less than 3 weeks after he had taken an army north and defeated Norwegian invaders, under King Harold Hardrada, at the Battle of Stamford Bridge, near York. Harold of England had then been strong in cavalry. However, the battle had seriously depleted the English king's resources in the south, and, although he reinforced his army in London on his way to meet the Norman invaders, the force which he brought to the Battle of Hastings was smaller than that which fought at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. No English cavalry was deployed, was a tactical decision. The troops withstood 4 Norman cavalry charges before they finally broke, and this may well have been due to the deaths of commanders rather than the superiority of the invaders' mounted troops. Although these mounted troops have been described as cavalry, the weapons and armor were similar to those of foot soldiers, and they did not fight as an organized group in the way that cavalries are normally understood to have done.